I think we need to get a model going. Don't go away. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fat Guy Productions. I am Paul, coming to you as always from beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. And indeed, I think it's time to get a model going. Normally, in especially the aircraft models, I like the bigger scale stuff. I really do. But today we're going to tackle a 1/48 scale Fokker, and I'm looking forward to it. This is out of my wheelhouse. So I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to come out, but it looks like fun. So let's take a look at what we have today. Here we have the Eduard Profi PaK Fokker D7OAW, whatever that means, in 1/48 scale. Some beautiful cover art. Yeah, I like Eduard models. I did the Spitfire with one of their kits, probably 1/48 scale, and I added a bunch of add-ons like resin parts and stuff like that. Really liked it, and I especially like the Profi PaKs, which means it comes with things like some photo etch and stuff like that. So this should be a very nice detailed model. There you can see all the different things and different directions. This is made from the Czech Republic, but I have not had any problems with these kits. And look at this. Look at all the different paint schemes you can do on this thing. I kind of like this guy. Lieutenant Ernst Udet, Yastafor, France, June 1918. Jeez. They were flying and fighting in 1918. That's pretty amazing. All right, let's take a look at the kit. I don't know how many episodes this video will end up being. It just depends on how the build goes, okay? As a smaller kit, I don't expect it to go too long, but you never know. Okay, so Eduard's instructions are always beautiful. Here's a whole thing on the Fokker. Wow, look at that. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. That really is. And then look at the instructions. So what they've got going on here is that all this blue stuff is not used. Okay. Then here's the photo etch detail parts. It even came with masks for masking off certain areas. Very explicit. This shows all the different trees. Here's the paint call outs, and then I gotta be honest, I don't know what the red means. I'm gonna really have to look at these instructions very carefully before I start this build, because it's been a long time since I built an Eduard kit, and I need to refamiliarize myself. That might be decal locations. Or paint? I just don't know. I don't know what the red means. I'm going to look it all up, but if you know, put it down in the comments below. Okay, so anyhow, but you see everything's laid out here. A simple model. You can, of course, go crazy with it, go hog wild with it. I'm not sure if we're talking, I've got research to do, if we're talking canvas or wood or canvas and wood. But a lot of times what you found is that these airplanes were canvas wrapped, or the bodies were wood panels and then the wings were canvas wrapped. So I'm not sure what's what here. Pretty neat. Pretty neat. They don't do anything halfway here. They build a nice kit. So do you want to see each sprue, or no? Let's just go ahead and get building. So let's get this to the side, and we can go ahead and start our build. And I'm not going to make the decision on the scheme yet. I'll do that when I'm forced to. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do, actually. I'm going to leave, and then I'll come back and start filming the build after I've reviewed the instructions really well, because I need to make sure I know what I'm doing. So don't go away. The funny part is, I don't see any part numbers on this sprue at all, so I have no idea what's happening here. But I found 13 and 3, so let's go ahead and get those off of here. And look, as a young modeler, I would just bend the parts off the sprues. And I've learned a lot as I model. And one thing that I've learned is like the thin cement. Hated that stuff as a kid, but I come to find out that's the only way to fly if you're building a model. So, love this size. This is kind of nice. I'm not used to the smaller scale, but I really am digging this. But I learned that the thin cement is the only way to fly when you're building these models. And same goes for cutting parts off of sprues. You damage your parts when you snap the parts off. In fact, I'm kind of upset when I get a sprue where a piece has come off by itself. That kind of makes me a little mad, sad, whatever. So the fuselage of this aircraft gets a couple pieces of photo etch. And so while I'm cutting that off, let's just talk in general about the kit itself. I've only built a couple Eduard Kits, but I have found them to be extraordinarily nice. The molding is flawless, lots of wonderful detail, and I'm telling you, in the kits that I've built, zero, that is in null or nada or nothing, zero flash, not one speck of flash. Everything fits really, really well. There is going to be a small exception today. We'll talk about it when we get to it. But for the most part, everything goes together like a dream. These kits are wonderful, and I especially love the Profi PaKs because the colored resin, it takes your cockpits to a whole new level. These kits are amazing. They're not too expensive. And they just come out beautifully. So, yeah, I'm really hooked on these Eduard Kits. Pardon me. Anyhow, you need to choose the build that you're going to do, because this kit comes with a couple variations and a couple different parts for the fuselage, depending on the variation that you're going to build. So I've picked mine. And based on that, I'm applying a photo etch as need be, and then we can go ahead and start our work on the cockpit. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the floor of the cockpit a tan brown, and I'm going to use the paint a little bit thicker than I normally would, and I'm actually going to try and get some streaks in it, because that gives you kind of a wood grain texture. Oh, now, you're not going to be able to see this at all, especially in this small scale. Hey, but every little detail matters, right? So now I'm cutting out a couple decals. Yeah, we got to turn to decaling this early in the build, because these aircraft were wrapped in a fabric called lozenge, and it's this weird patterned fabric. I don't really understand it, but despite the paint jobs on the outside, you could see the lozenge pattern on the inside. So you have to take and apply some decals to the cockpit to give it that lozenge pattern. And you'll see more of the lozenge on some of the wing surfaces. A lot of them were painted over, but not all. So we're just going to apply these decals because we need those to go ahead and get set and conform to all the grooves and details and stuff. So we'll get that in and set those aside to dry. So I painted the back of the seat nice wood tan to match the floors, and the fronts of the seat got kind of a reddish leather looking finish to it because it comes with this like seat pad. And so we painted those a leathery color. And now I'm just applying the photo etch seat belts that come with the kit. And let me tell you something. They're a little fiddly, okay? I'll admit that. They're a little fiddly, and you got to kind of bend them and shape them and stuff. But the detail and the interest that these add to your kit, it's phenomenal. And it's just awesome that they come with the kit. Look at this. Look at this. This is the interior with a little bit of the photo etch that it came with, a little bit of painting, and look at those seat belts, how much detail there is in there. So, yeah, I really do love these Profi PaK kits. So now I'm going to go ahead and get the interior glued in, and here's where I'm going to talk about a little bit of a fit issue. By the time you get decals on and glue on and stuff like that, it becomes very difficult for the fuselage to close up around all of the stuff that you're cramming in here. You've got the interior. You're going to have the engine. You're going to have the ammo cans. You're going to have all of these things that are going to make it difficult for you to close this up. And I ended up having to trim away some material from the open side. What I should have done is I should have trimmed away a little bit of material from both sides to make sure that everything stayed kind of even. I didn't do that, and so as I was trying to fit the fuselage together, I removed some material. So you may have to do that. Just be aware of that. It's really not indicative of the kit. It just is what it is. But look at how nice the interior looks. There you see the cockpit's in place, the dashboard's in place. You saw the lozenge decal. And man, it just looks amazing. I love these Profi PaK kits. Now, that picture I showed you already had the control panel in it. Here I am actually making the control panel. And you take the basic plastic part and you flip it around the opposite direction so that it doesn't have any of the molded in detail. And then you're going to layer on a stack of this color printed photo etch, and it's just amazing. It really is. I can't say enough how this elevates your build. This stuff is fantastic, and I just love it. Now, when you're working with the photo etch, obviously fine cement from Tamiya isn't going to work. You're going to need your CA, and I'm using my gel control here. And you also see how small the stuff is. This is the dashboard, and look how tiny it is, okay? At 1/48 scale, a Fokker biplane is pretty small, especially when you have a big old ham fingers like I have. So, yeah, it's a little bit difficult, but you can. If I can get through it, anybody can get through it. Well, maybe not anybody. Certainly not a really basic modeler, but anybody with let's say average skills should be able to pull this off. So just be prepared for a lot of tiny parts, and look at the detail in those gauges from that color photo etch. And this isn't even done yet. It gets little photo etch switches, and it's pretty amazing. Now, this kit is a smaller kit, and so it's going to build pretty quick. But even still, I have learned to be patient in my model builds and make sure that glues are dried and paints are dried. And so this kit is going to take me a little over a week to build, just because I am being slower and patient. While the cockpit and all that stuff is drying, I'm going to turn my attention to the engine. And, you have to remember, look, the engine's really nicely detailed. Could you amp that up and take it to the next level? Absolutely. I don't think you need to in a tiny little 1/48 scale airplane where you're only going to see the very top of the engine. I just don't see any reason to go hog wild. Now, I'm not going to cut corners. I'm not going to cut corners because there's a pride in buildership. But, I don't think some of the details need to be added. I'm just going to go along with a good paint job, a good construction, a little bits of wash and stuff like that, and I'm going to call it good. So the motor is being built using Tamiya extra thin, quick-setting cement, and we'll get all the pieces together, and then we'll go ahead and start getting this painted. While we're doing some assembly, we can also knock out some of the wing assembly. So we're going to go ahead and cut those from the sprues using the side cutters. This, of course, has two wings, and it comes with a nice full piece for the one wing, and then the other surface is another piece that you put on. So, as always, we're going to go ahead and clean up all the sprue marks where we cut the parts off. And perfect example of why you want to cut, because if you were to just snap this off, you could have a little hole here you're going to need to fill. I'm not going to have that problem because I did cut the part off the sprue. So, anyhow, the wing parts go together really nicely. They fit very solid. So all I have to do is put them together, align them, and run some extra thin cement around the edges, and we're good to go. So now for the motor, what I did is I painted it a nice gloss black, allowed that to dry, and then I went over it with some metallic aluminum paint, and it gave it a really nice finish. And then once I added a little bit of panel liner to it, it really looked fantastic. And like I said, you're only going to see just the very, very top of the motor. And so the panel liner is really all it takes. So you see here, always shake your panel liner, otherwise it gets a little too thin and doesn't really give you the highlight that you're looking for. So we'll shake this up and we'll just kind of brush it on. And it's a shame because it's really a beautiful motor, but you don't get to see any of it, which is a little bit sad. See the part where I'm doing right there? That's all you're going to get to see. That's it. Oh, and the tips of the exhaust pipes. Now, there is a different build in the kit with a different fuselage where you get to see a little bit more of the right side of the engine. So you might want to do a little more detailing if you do that build. But in my case, all you get is this little top part sticking out and the ends of the exhaust pipes. And that's it. Now, if you know anything about injection molding and model building, creating model kits, they're pretty much engineering marvels. So you have to understand there's only so much they can do, and in this particular instance, the exhaust pipes are not open on the ends, and I cannot abide that. So what I did is I took my X-Acto, centered it in the end of the exhaust pipes, kind of spun it around to get a little starting point. Now I'm using my micro drill bit and just kind of drilling the ends of the exhaust pipes out so that they're open and look more realistic, because those are going to be sticking out of the side of the fuselage and you're going to see them, and I want them to look right. Okay, so I've got the right side of the fuselage. It's got the interior in it, and it has the ammo canisters in it. And I'm getting ready now to just go ahead and glue the motor in. It really actually fits in there just about perfectly. So, you know, a little CA glue here, because I've got paint on all these different surfaces, and they're a little bit too delicate to be scraping and stuff like that. So I'm just going to use CA here and just line it up in its grooves, and it just kind of clicks in perfectly. It's great. And look, you can see it in this shot. It's a really well-detailed little engine, you know. It looks fantastic. It's a shame it gets lost in the build, like a lot of this stuff, you know, but hey, again, there's pride in knowing that you built it the right way. Okay, so as I said, I had to do quite a bit of adjusting to the interior pieces to make the hull go together cleanly. And now I've got that all set, and I've brought the two pieces together. And what I'm doing is I'm just applying pressure at each little segment, and then I'm applying the Tamiya thin cement and letting it run through the seam and weld that part together. After that has dried up, I will move to the next segment of the fuselage, and I will do that all the way around. Now, the fit ended up being so perfect that I didn't have to do any work with filler. All I had to do was sanding with a little sanding stick, and the seam was gone. It was that easy. And that's what I'm talking about with these Eduard kits. They're really, really well made. Love these things. I definitely plan to build more. So the fuselage is glued together, and already the airplane is looking amazing. And I just can't help myself. I gotta just do a little, I gotta put the wings on for just a second, just to see what it looks like with at least one set of the wings on there. And so there it is. You know, I just couldn't help myself. You know, I needed to see that. Little bit of a tight fit. I'll adjust that when I go to glue them on, but yeah, I just needed to have an idea of how this thing is going to look. And so far, it's really shaping up great, and I'm loving it. Okay, so I glued the rear elevator on, and, you know, that piece, it's got a seam around it where it attaches to the body. Leave that, don't fill it, okay, because that's how the real plane is. This is a piece that can be unbolted and taken right off the airplane. So there would be a seam exactly where Eduard has it molded. So you glue it on, but leave that seam there, okay, because it would be accurate. Now I'm just gluing together the two pieces of the rudder. I'm just trying to get as much done as I can before I head to the paint booth. So now I am at the paint booth, and I've got to get some primer down. And the first thing I did is I took some cotton and I tucked it into the cab, or the cabin, or what the cockpit, I guess, and around the engine and stuff, so that I wouldn't get paint or primer or anything on there. And I'm just laying down Tamiya fine primer. Stuff is magic, and we're going to put that on all the surfaces that I have ready to go, and then we'll let that dry before we go ahead and start putting paint down. Okay, so now we're going to turn to some of the wing surfaces. We've got to put lozenge on some of them. And not all of them, because some get paint. But we got to put lozenge on some of them. And the lozenge had like a printed side and a non-printed side, but you could kind of see through it. So the printed side was fairly vivid. The non-printed side, you were just seeing through the fabric and seeing that design. And they represented that well in the decals. So you had different colors and different surfaces. They really did a fantastic job with the lozenge decals. And they're a little intimidating looking because they're kind of big, but they really went on really nicely. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get them cut out of the sheet and trim as close to the printed portion as possible so you don't have a lot of slop that you have to deal with. And then we can go ahead and start applying them. So I've got my lower wing, and I've got my lozenge cut out. I've got my water, my brush, and somewhere over here I've got my Walther's setting solution. And again, like any water slide decal, you're just going to kind of dunk it in the water. One of the tricks here is to make sure that your wing surface is really wet, okay? You want water underneath that decal so you can it'll help you move the decal around and get it perfectly placed. Then you can kind of squeegee it out and let it kind of take hold of the plastic. But for now, you just want a lot of water down on there so you can get this decal moved around. So we're just going to get it loose from the backing, and then we'll just go ahead and slide it off the paper onto the wing surface, and then we'll go ahead and get it positioned. Okay, so I've got the lozenge applied to the lower wing, just the one side. I'll do the other side after this is all nice and dry. And now I'm just using my Walther's Solvaset, and I'm just really concentrating on the edges, okay? That's where I really want to make sure I don't have any little flappy pieces of decal. And then I'll go over the rest of it so it takes to the ribs. Now, the kit comes with these stripes. And they're decals and they're stripes that you're supposed to put over each rib. I don't think that's right. I really don't think that's right. I think, though, those are decals that are trying to represent highlights where those ribs were poking out. I don't think there were really stripes on the wings. I think it's just highlights. So I'm not using them. That's just me. That's the way I'm going to be. All right, so I'm putting them aside and not using them and just using the lozenge. And now I've got the top wing, and we're painting it my red. I'm using a little bit of a darker red, and it's over a gray primer, so it's getting a kind of a little bit of a darker finish. Now, I'm doing everything in flat, all right, because I think that's how it should look. And I'm also being really haphazard with all of my paint jobs. Thin spots, splotchy spots, and you see how I'm randomly putting, lines across the surface of the wing. The idea there is some areas may have more paint and some areas may have less paint, and I'm trying to be really irregular here. Now, later when I go ahead and put the other decals on, I'm going to have some gloss surfaces to make sure I don't get silvering. So your paint doesn't have to be flat now. I'm just really saying that ultimately the entire airplane finish is going to be a flat finish. And in fact, even though I'm painting it with flat paint, later I will apply some gloss coat to it where the decals go. And then I'm going to hit the entire thing up, decals and all, with a flat overcoat to bring it all back. So just remember, if the red you have or the paint that you're using isn't flat, it doesn't matter. You can adjust it later, and it's probably for the best anyhow. Okay, so with the body painted and dried, I'm now putting some flat black paint around the nose section of the aircraft per the callouts in the instructions. And again, I'm being really haphazard with this, very light, where it's patchy looking. I think that adds a little bit more realism to it. So I just masked everything off using a little bit of thin masking tape. And now I'm just airbrushing it on ever so lightly. Now, I got to tell you, yeah, the cotton worked great, but it was a bear to tuck in there, especially because you're trying to be careful and not break anything. So, yeah, it was not the easiest thing in the world to do, but, hey, it worked. It did the job. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and finish getting this black on. And like I do in all my projects, I'll remove the masking tape as soon as I'm done cleaning the airbrush. That's my modus operandi. So we'll finish getting the black down, then we'll clean the airbrush, then we can unmask this. Unmasking a paint job is simultaneously the most exciting and fun part of a build and the most terrifying. Yes, I've had my tape pull paint off before. It's heartbreaking. I cannot begin to tell you, especially if you're really killing it at that point. It's heartbreaking. I'm not going to have any problems today, okay? But, that's always in the back of your mind. Am I going to botch this? So anyhow, like I said, I'm not going to have any problems. The tape is coming off fine. I did have one little spot here where I was having a hard time getting a grip of it, so I kind of picked it up with my X-Acto knife so I could get a hold of it with some tweezers and then my fingers, and we'll pull it off and see what we have. And it came out really good. And you can kind of see here how splotchy my paint is. Now, that would never, ever fly for me in a normal build, but I just think that's how it would probably look in real life back during World War I. Another exciting moment, removing the cotton. Now, yes. I still have little strands of cotton coming out of there, Normally, what you would use is you'd use little pieces of foam rubber or something like that. But this is so fragile and so delicate, I didn't feel I could get away with that. So I opted for cotton instead, and it left me having to do a little bit of work. You see me picking little woolly boogers out of my build, but yeah, it did the job, and the plane is looking amazing. So here's a couple shots, and you can see around the opening to the engine how splotchy I've got it and stuff. And yeah, that's exactly how I wanted it, because I feel like in World War II, they weren't running these to their local body shop and giving them these perfect paint jobs. I think the paint jobs need to be a little erratic. So this is exactly, and look at that cockpit. Look at the detail in that cockpit. I just love that. And that's not me. That's not me. That's the kit. Okay, the kit made that happen. All right, here's a challenge. Here's a challenge for you. This particular aircraft, the upper wing, has stripes on it. Now, some people say that it's got lozenge on the bottom and stripes on the tops. I've seen pictures of it striped on top and bottom, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stripe it top and bottom, and it just so happens I had a roll of tape that is just about the thickness of the gap between each strut. So I'm using that to make my stripes, and I'm using the struts to register my spacing. And I'm going to, because I have to do each side as an individual, I'm going to go ahead and just put the wing down on a piece of cardboard, put the tape on, and then use the tape to kind of hold it onto the cardboard, and I'll paint it flat on this cardboard. Then when it's dry, I'll flip it over, I'll mask the other side, and we'll do it all again. Again, this is, there's so much that's, interpreted by the model builders and historians. We know the aircraft had the stripes, okay? Where they were, how they were, I think there's a lot of guesswork in there. So anyhow, I'm just going to go ahead and stripe this end to end using the rib marks as guides, and then we can go ahead and paint it. Now, while we're here, let's just talk about the paint. it's white stripes. It's red and white stripes. So you might ask, well, why would you paint the red first? Well, I'll tell you. If I painted the white first, everything else was over gray primer. If I painted the white first on the wing, then the red would be a different color than the rest of the airplane. So I couldn't do that. So what I did is I painted the whole thing red over gray primer to get a consistent red, and then I'm going to mask it, and I'm going to prime it again with Tamiya Fine Primer. Then I'll put the white paint down, and I think that will work out the best. Normally, you would never do it this way. You would never paint the white over the red, but I just wanted to make sure that the red was consistent throughout the entire model. Tedious? Yes. But it's going to prove to be worth every bit of the effort. Okay, so anyhow, you see that tape is masking it and it's holding the wing down. And you also can see I got a couple places where the tape is lifting a little bit. I was worried about that when I noticed it, but it ends up not really being a problem at all. So it's going to work out perfectly. So like I said, I went ahead and I hit it with a little bit of primer. And again, I'm not really going for perfect coating. And now I'm airbrushing on the flat white. And again, I'm also being erratic with the flat whites. Some of the stripes are going to be brighter, some are going to be dimmer, some are going to be splotchy. And that's why if I get a little fuzz around some of the edges where that tape lifted, I'm not going to worry about it. But, as it turns out, it's not going to be a problem. All right, I can tell you already I'm going to have some fuzzy spots. I got some spots where the tape was lifting a little bit, and that's my own fault. I didn't want to put the tape down too hard. I was worried of it peeling up the undercoat. The other thing is you'll notice the paint's, oh, look at that, not too bad. The paint's real splotchy, the white. And I did that on purpose. I didn't want, I mean, this is World War I. I don't think they were putting automotive classic paint jobs on these things. So I didn't really go hog wild on the paint. Boy, this came out great. I'm so happy with this. And then I just have to repeat this on the underside of the airplane, on the underside of this wing. Okay, seriously, look at the wing and how it came out. It really does look phenomenal. I'm so happy with that. And yeah, it's not your normal paint job, but it's perfect. And look at how the lozenge worked out on the lower wing. I think that looks amazing. Okay, so now we can go ahead and put on the rest of the decals. And the first thing I did is I took the model over, and anywhere I was going to have to put decals on the paint surface, I sprayed down a little gloss clear so that I wouldn't get silvering. I didn't have to do the whole aircraft, just where the decals are going to go. And then I'm going to hit it with a flat coat after everything is dry. But now I can go ahead and put on the decals. And they worked out really great, except for a couple little items I noticed. The rudder, the iron cross on the rudder, it goes right over the control surface. Why isn't it 2 decals? I had to put it on, let it dry, and then cut it with my razor knife, then hit it with the setting solution to make that settle in. The big V for the tail, I think it's a little too thick, and in it's the width of the V, and I also think the decal is kind of just unwieldy. It was a pain, let's say. So anyhow, I've got the decals on, and now I'm back at the paint booth, and everything is getting fixed down with a coat of flat coat. And it's going to bring all of this together. It's going to lock all these decals together. It's going to give me the finish that I want, and it's going to look amazing. So while I'm putting the flat coat on the fuselage, you see the LO, an apostrophe? I guess, see, the builds are based on certain pilots. And this particular build and this particular pilot, I guess he always had that LO on his aircraft, and it was a wink and a nod to his girlfriend. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, and I got to tell you something else. Look, I normally don't do axis builds. Like, if I'm going to build a tank, I'm going to build a U.S. tank. If I'm going to build an airplane, I'm going to build a U.S. airplane. But there's just something about, like, the old Red Baron type airplanes and the biplanes and stuff, where this just seemed like the plane to build. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing here. No, this is hard to do, but I think it's worth every bit of the effort. The propellers on these planes were wood, and if you know anything about woodworking and laminating wood, they are made out of laminated wood, and that means they took a very fine surfaced wood, stacked and glued it all together, and clamped it to make this massive block of wood that they then milled the propellers out of. Well, you could see, and I'll put a picture right here, you can see how these looked, okay? Because often they would mix the woods for a combination of strength and flexibility and all these other things. And so you could see that, and I want to represent that here. And there's lots of ways to do it. Here's how I did it. I started out by painting the propeller a light tan using just a plain old acrylic and letting that dry. Now I've taken the thinnest pinstripe tape that I have, and I've cut that even down thinner to just tiny little thin strips, and I'm running them along the length of the propeller. Now, you have to think of it from the side view. These pieces of tape need to run straight from end to end. If they're not straight, it's not right, because each board was straight. Okay, so they were layered together and stacked together, and so you got to get all these stripes in, and now I'm just using a little darker brown oil paint, and I'm painting in between the little pinstripes. Once I'm done, I'll remove the tape, and I will let that dry thoroughly, and that's going to give me a really great layered look for my propeller. It's going to look fantastic, I promise. All right? Then, after the oil paint is dry, I'm going to give this a wash of that darker brown oil paint, really super thin down with turpenoid thinner, and I'm going to kind of wash the whole thing to darken it and unify it. And trust me, folks, this propeller is going to look amazing. Yeah, and then we got to set it aside to dry. Just remember, when you're working with oil paints, they take a long time to dry, so you might want to get on the propeller early in your build if you're in a hurry. Get that done and get it out of the way so it can start to dry. But yeah, worth every bit of the effort. It was not easy, totally worth it. So I'm pulling the tape off the propeller here, and I realize the camera view is not the best. And I have, since this video, I have done a lot of adjustments to my camera placements. I've added in an extra camera to give me a whole another option as far as the angle of the view. And so in future builds, the cameras should be in tighter, and give you a better look at what I'm doing. So I apologize here, but basically I'm just pulling the tape off and getting an opportunity to see kind of what my propeller is going to look like. All right, so here's the basic part of the propeller. Again, remember, this has to dry thoroughly. It's oil paint, so it's going to take a few days. But then, look at that, look at that, look at that, look at that, look at that. How fabulous is that? And it's not even done. Once I put the little darker wash on it and let that dry, this is going to just look amazing. And then to top that off, after that's dry, it's going to get a really great clear coat and be just this beautiful glossy finish. It's going to look amazing. I'm super excited. Favorite part of the build. Okay, so machine guns. Let's talk machine guns. They come with some great photo etch parts, and what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to cut the little barrel off the end of the gun, then cut that whole little middle section out and replace it with the photo etch. Well, then it would be hollow. It didn't seem right, and at this small scale, all I did is I took the photo etch and wrapped it around the cooling fins, and glued that on to the gun. I didn't remove any parts. I just wrapped it around. That meant at the end I had to cut off the gun sights from the photo etch and glue those on, but it all worked out great. The guns look amazing. Hit them up with a little bit of a wash and we're all set. Now here, I'm getting ready to put them on the airplane. I had already kind of made a mistake here and put the 2 outer wing struts on already. Wasn't thinking. So they're going to be in my way a little bit, but I'll work around it. But here's the thing. Whether it be me not understanding something in the instructions or be a flaw in the design or whatever, I had a bear of a time getting these machine guns on the way it looked to me like they were supposed to go. It was really, really difficult. I ended up having to modify one of the feed tubes on the left gun to make this thing fit right, to make the 2 guns fit right. I'm pretty positive they're not correct, but I don't know any better, okay? I just don't know how they were supposed to go, and the instructions aren't that clear. All I know is they weren't going on the way I thought, and so, hey, it is what it is. Anyhow, with the guns finally in place, I can go ahead and put the top wing on. And you see, any port in a storm, I've got a couple of guitar picks, a toothpick, some tubes of oil paint, and a bottle of cement, holding everything in position. And what I did is I just kind of set the plane down, got it propped so it was in the right place, moved each strut to where it belonged, tapped it with a little dab of glue, and then just let it sit there. Now that it's on its main struts, now I can go back in and glue in the remaining struts, and everything is in place. It's so much easier. So all I did is I put the 2 outer struts in and the 2 main inner struts in. Glued the top wing into the airplane, let that dry. Now I'm putting all the extras in, okay? And that was the way, that was totally the move. Totally the move. And you notice, hey, I'm using that box I made for building Truck 18 to lift the model up more to my face and eye level. And that's been a real heaven send. Best thing ever. All right, so now the landing gear and the little wing foil thingy, whatever you want to call that. Again, I'm just going to kind of get it set in place, line up the little struts, then touch some glue to it and let it dry. It fought me a little bit. You see right there, it's crooked. I actually snapped off one of the struts, which wasn't a problem. I just went ahead, glued the rest of it on, just with the 3 struts. Then after that was nice and solid, I went and glued the other strut back in place. No big deal. But yeah, it was a little bit of work to get that thing to work straight. So, but in the end, it went on. And now, while I'm down here, I can put on a few other details like the tail dragger and some lift handles and the step, and then do a little bit of touch-up painting. And we're really closing in on this one, and it's looking fantastic in my personal opinion. So now, what about weathering, you say? Well, I say no, and I'll tell you why. I don't know these airplanes enough to have any idea of what they're supposed to look like. So, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to leave it the way it is, at least for the time being. I went in, this plane doesn't need that much support cables, so using Easy Line, I ran the support cables it did need. I glued on the propeller, and there it is. And now we can go ahead and take a look at some glamour shots of this and see what the finished product looks like. Well, there it is. My Fokker D7 in all its glory. And you can see in scale, its size. It's not a big model. And boy, did I have a fun time with that thing. I really did. I had a great time with that build. Not the easiest model I'll ever build, not the hardest model I'll ever build. And I'll tell you, if you're wanting to get into building World War I aircraft, this might be the perfect kit. It will challenge you, but nothing is Mount Everest, okay? You're going to be able to build this model, and you're going to learn a lot about building World War I aircraft. A lot of fun. You know, if you take it in the context of things like a triplane or half of the other airplanes out there, they have so much rigging, and rigging is a challenge for a lot of people. So tons of rigging in these other kits, whereas this just has some really basic rigging, not really a big deal. This is a completely doable and fun kit. I promise you, you're going to enjoy it. Give it a try. All right, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a giant thumbs up, click subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss one of my model build videos. If you have any questions or comments, especially comments, I'd really love to hear from you guys, especially the World War I aircraft model builders. Talk to me. Tell me what I did right. Tell me what I did wrong. Talk to me about this. I'd love to learn more, because I can promise you this is probably not going to be the last Eduard kit I build. I see others in my future, so please, please, please put your comments down below. All right, I hope the rest of your day is glorious. Until next time, this is Paul from Fat Guy Productions saying, be good.